Hey, so on Friday night, I was part of the escort for the support groups, along with two Franklinton police officers, Sergeant McKelvin and Officer Gross. And so after the game, we were responsible for getting the support groups out of the Superdome and into Champion Square, where any of the kids that weren't going to ride the bus back to Franklinton were able to sign out with their parents. And so once that had happened, we were going to walk back to where the buses were. We had to walk to the other side of the Smoothie King Center to where the buses were parked. And so we kind of split up that responsibility. I was going to go with the band, and Officer Gross was going to go with part of the support groups that were on one bus, and Sergeant McKelvin was going to go with the other support groups that were on another bus. And so the band was the first one to start walking, and Jessica Young, who was one of the band mothers and sponsors, noticed that there was a disturbance up ahead. So as you walk towards Dave Dixon Drive, there's a ramp that comes from one of the parking garages adjacent to the Superdome, and there were some people coming down that ramp, and we were going to end up merging together. And she noticed that there was some arguing going on, and so she, was able to tell the kids to stop. She motioned to me that there was something happening up front, and so I walked up and tried to figure out what was happening. Of course, these things are confusing because you don't know who's arguing with who. You don't know who's affiliated with who. You don't know who's trying to stop an argument, who's instigating an argument. And I was probably 15 feet away, and I couldn't figure out what was happening. And all of a sudden, you hear a shot ring out. It was just one shot. I've heard lots of rumors that there were multiple shots, but it was just one shot. Anything else that anybody heard was probably echoes that bounced off of concrete and walls and everything else. But once the shot went off, then the group kind of dispersed. They moved down towards Dave Dixon Drive away from the Superdome, and there were other people that kind of walked back behind me towards Champion Square for a few feet, and then the person that was ultimately the victim sat down. And it wasn't apparent to me then that he had actually been shot. Again, I was still trying to figure out what was going on. Sergeant McKelvin ran up. He had heard the shot, wanted to find out what was happening, and our first priority was to make sure that the kids were safe. So I asked him to make sure everybody was accounted for. So he went back and got the support groups and everybody accounted for and made sure they were in the Superdome or on their way back inside the Superdome. Officer Gross came up and noticed that the guy sitting down was in need of first aid. He identified him as a victim, and so immediately started rendering first aid to him. At the same time, the other half of our security detail with Chief Brown and Officer McGee and Lieutenant Rice, they had been working with the buses to get the buses to move to where we could load up all the team and the support groups. They heard the shot come out, so they immediately responded. And when they arrived, Chief Brown relieved Officer Gross and started performing life-saving measures on the man that was the victim in the shooting. While all that was happening, it was still a little bit unclear what had transpired. We had other NOPD guys show up. We started looking for the shell casing. They roped off the scene. They arranged for an ambulance to show up. And then when the ambulance got there, Chief Brown and his guys put the victim on the stretcher and ended up getting him into an ambulance, and then he left the scene. At that point, everything was fairly resolved, and due to the quick work of the NOPD and some information, they were able to find the guy that was responsible for the shooting. I know this can be scary. I wanted to put this out in order to dispel a lot of rumors. I've heard a lot of different things. Ultimately, what I've just described is what happened. There are some details that I've left out and some details from other people's perspective, but that is essentially what has happened. I think everybody that's watching this should be very proud of a couple of different people that were involved. Jessica Young for stopping the kids from moving forward, because ultimately they would have been right in the line of fire had she not done that. I think everyone should be proud of the Franklinton police officers, Sergeant McKelvin and Officer Gross, who were the first to respond, and they immediately they performed their responsibilities exactly as they should have. And then Chief Brown and Officer McGee and Lieutenant Rice for showing up and ultimately providing the life-saving measures for the gentleman that was shot. It's an unfortunate incident, but the good thing is that we're going to learn some things from this, and we're going to move forward in terms of how we address these situations. There's a lot of things that you can plan for. Some of these things you just can't plan for. And I think the last group of people that need to be recognized are the support group sponsors, because ultimately they are responsible every time they leave school grounds with our students. And they don't know what's going to happen. They can plan for as much as they can, but ultimately they're the ones responsible. And they kept our kids safe. They weren't ever in any danger. and you all should be very proud of them. So I just wanted to put that out. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. And that's all we got. Thanks.